What I meant in this prison book was not that the disciplinary society starts with the development of prisons. I would say exactly the contrary, since the problem which struck me when I was studying this field was this one. When you read the books written by the reformers, or the social reformers of the 18th century, you notice a very strong aggressivity against any system as the imprisonment. For a very simple reason. It is that prison was, at least in the French, the Italian, in the German system, in the English one was a little different, but prison was not at all a punishment. It was an administrative measure which was taken against people outside of the law, outside of the juridical system, outside of the judicial institutions, only when the administration, the monarchic power wanted to get rid of somebody. They put them in jail. So jail was exactly the contrary of what people were looking for when they wanted to build or to figure out a new good penal justice. And the criticism of prison is general in the middle of the 18th century. Then you look at what happened and what was organized and institutionalized at the end of the 18th century with the new penal codes in France, in Germany and so on, and then you find prison everywhere. It was the main means, the major means of punishment. And why this change? And that was my problem, and that is the theme of the book. And I had the feeling that the reason was that, in spite of the fact that prison was the symbol of the monarchic arbitrariness, in spite of that, they found that prison and imprisonment could be a very good means, a very good tool in order to not only to punish but to reform prisoners and inmates. And this reform, this change in the mind, in the attitude, in the behavior and so on, how could they imagine they can obtain it? Through disciplinary techniques. And those disciplinary techniques, where did they found them? In school, in the army, where they have been used since the middle of the 17th century. And they have tried to build penal institutions on the model not of the ancient prison, but on the model of school, army, and so on. And so you can see the penal system as an expression or a consequence, one of the last consequences of this disciplinary system which has been developed in other institutions. And as it happens often, this final application of the disciplinary system became then a model for a new development of those disciplinary techniques in other fields. And the panopticon, the Bentham panopticon, is very interesting from this point of view, because Bentham had this idea of a panopticon in order to organize a good prison where people could be treated, formed, reformed, and so on, as in a disciplinary institution. And then, after having this idea, he had the idea that this panopticon could be used also for factories, for schools, and so on. And you see this development. So, prison is only a part of this disciplinary system. When I mean disciplinary system, I don't mean that society has been organized on this type. What I call disciplinary system is much more a kind of rationality than a total institution. And that's the difference between what Goffman has described, that is, real institutions with a certain kind of organization, internal organization. What I mean by disciplinary system is much more kind of rationality. How can we govern other people, form other people, obtain that people behave in a certain way, which are the best means, the most economical means, the most efficient means in order to obtain that. And that's the discipline, I think. See? After a while, after more than 1 century of trying this disciplinary system, people noticed that it was not at all the most economical means, but a very costly means. And that there are much more efficient and discreet and implicit ways of informing and leading peoples than this disciplinary techniques. And for instance, to give you only an example, when you see how the great factories have been organized, at least in France, at the beginning of the 18th century, you see very well that they had as a model disciplinary rationality, with a general survey, with very strict rules and so on, at this point that when the great mines have been exploited in France in the second half of the 18th century, the idea of the government was to use soldiers as miners, or to transform miners in soldiers, because they considered that there were one good disciplinary organization, which was the army, and the workers' class was supposed to be organized as an army in order to be efficient, docile, and so on. But in the middle of the 19th century, you see very well that, or even in 1820, 1830, people noticed that it was not at all the good means in order to have docile workers, but that the system, like the les assurances, insurance, caisse d'épargne, saving banks, and so on, what was something much more efficient than this military discipline. And so the control, a new kind of control and organization developed from this moment, which we could call the assurantial control system, which is something very different, much more efficient, and much more acceptable than the discipline.